Hey everyone, this is Tommy from Studio Ultra Mecha with another Operation Battle Ready tutorial. Episode 37, Black Cloth. Today we're going to tackle this old bugbear, how to properly highlight black cloth so that it is both dynamic and not so dynamic that it doesn't look like black anymore. Here I want to show you how I'm thinning out my gradients here and how thin I thin my paint, so you can kind of see towards the end of that how you can start to see the paper through it. That's how thin you want to work your paints on a wet palette. And then I bring the medium gray towards the black, and then I'll be able to mix the two there and get a gradient between those two colors. And I'll do the same thing over here between the graphene gray and the graphite. Start with this mid-tone here between the flat black and the graphene gray, and if you can see the lights hitting the model, we're using that as a guide. We're just painting over the highlights that our light bulb is casting onto the model, and that's how we're going to establish this first level of base highlights. A lot of what's involved here when you do see me go back and forth on this model is trying to make those transitions as smooth as possible between the tones. So I'm getting really thin layers of the flat black to kind of go back over that, and if I don't like that, if that's not smooth enough, I'll go back into that mid-tone really thin and lay that right over the seam as well, and do some light dabbing with the brush. And really thin layers is what makes those smooth transitions possible. And now we're moving up the gradient closer to pure graphene gray. Then we go back into the dark there and see how we're trying to kind of blend that smoothly back in. And then, but we are building up graphene gray on all those highlights. And as we continue to build up these highlights, we start favoring the brighter colors towards the top of each section of the cloth here. As you see, the cloth's all kind of sectioned off with seams and whatnot. We're going to start favoring like the higher up edges of each section to create a little more light play on the model. Gradient to include some of that graphite mixed into the graphene gray. And again, see how we're favoring the top. We're starting to leave the darker highlights towards the bottom, we're starting to leave those uncovered. We're starting to just focus our highlights up towards the top of those sections. One of the things is in a lot of these tutorials, we kind of take steps, kind of chop things up a little artificially so that you can understand all the steps we do. But in this one, I'm more painting like I naturally paint. So you'll see I'm building up these highlights, but I'll stop and I'll go back and I'll smooth out something that I see that I don't like. Go back into the darker colors, but then go right back to the highlights again. But you just got to remember the general pattern. We're building up those highlights, we're favoring the top edges of each section, and then you can see the effect it has. It's very bold, but yet it's not extreme. So also the reason we're not bringing this up to white is you save that for black armor. Okay? Don't bring your cloth highlights up to white ever. Save those white highlights for corners and glints when you have like something you're painting black that's supposed to be hard, like armor or shield or something. Making sure real thin, real up on the top edges of all those sections that we have those pure graphite highlights. That really shows the favoring of the light on that section. That's what's going to create that kind of realistic lighting effect. And the realistic lighting is well, maybe it's hyper realistic. I don't know how realistic it is, but I mean the way light lands on stuff, right? And the reason that's so important is that kind of keeps it from just looking like gray cloth, as you'll see when this wraps up. so here we are finished with the painting, and we've got all our highlights laid out. We've got a good looking black cloth, but we can get a little bit more dynamic with this, and we're going to include using Minitaire Ghost Tints. Okay, Ghost Tints, made by Minitaire. They're a really thick, translucent ink or wash. You've got a thin amount. And here on this palette, I'm kind of showing you how thin I like to get it. I just put it in a bottle cap, add a little water, and this is the most beautiful stuff. Look at that. Nuln oil doesn't do that, right? Okay, so then what we're gonna do here is off camera, I hit this with my airbrush air, and just to dry it out, and that ghost tints are kind of glossy, right? So, and just a little too much. Like, I think it looks pretty good like that, but it's just a little too much gloss. So we're pulling out that Vallejo Mecha Varnish, new stuff I picked up. It's really nice. It's a really good matte varnish, and I'm just gonna brush it on there, and that's gonna take away the too much gloss effect of the ghost tint. Here you can watch what happens to that varnish when I hit it with my the air compressor, the air out of my airbrush. You can watch it just dry immediately. Like magic. I hope you found today's tutorial informative, and I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons over at Patreon that make these videos possible. And as always, if you would be so kind, please like and subscribe.